So here's this thing with the slopes. You go all up to like 1812, you can go to a 112, which is about as flat as you can get without it being completely flat. And you're saying that there was a danger, safety concern there, but the problem is, Director, you put your counter snipers on a 312 roof, which is steeper than the 112. And by the way, the 112 is ADA compliant. You can build a ramp for a wheelchair on a 112 roof. So these are nothing but pathetic excuses, and they make no sense, and they're a bunch of cow dung. All the law enforcement I've spoken with over the last 9 days are amazed that the AGR rooftop was not secure. And you want to know why? Because it's dangerous. I have never had any long gun training in my life. I own an AR-15, and last time I shot it one time my whole life. It was 6 years ago. That is until Saturday, where we recreated the events in Savoy, Texas. We recreated what happened in Butler. I was lying prone on a sloped roof at 130 yards at 6:30 at night. And I knew that he had a scope. I didn't know what kind, red dot or magnified. So I shot 8 rounds from both. You know what the result was? 15 out of 16 kill shots. And the one I missed would have hit the president's ear. That's a 94% success rate. And that shooter was a better shot than me. It is a miracle President Trump wasn't killed. Corey Comparatori's life is over because that damn shooter made it on the roof. And it wasn't the roof that was dangerous. It was a nut job on top of the roof. You know what else is dangerous? I believe your horrifying ineptitude and your lack of skilled leadership is a disgrace. Your obfuscating today is shameful. And you should be fired immediately and go back to Garden Doritos. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Kimberly Cheatle, director of the Secret Service, no more after relentless pressure from Democrats and Republicans. Welcome to another installment of the Connecticut Gun Bench. Today's video is brought to you by P.A.N. Firearms, LLC. P.A.N. Firearms, your NRA certification of multifaceted gun training. You can reach us at 203-300-6343 or use our website at www.panfirearmsllc.com. As always, there'll be a link in the description box below. And if you like channel-like content, you can support me with the link in the description box. Okay, here's my PSA. If your comments disappear from my channel, I'm not doing it. This seems to be a reoccurring problem that I'm having trouble with posting comments outside of my own channel. So something's obviously going on. It seems to be some undue scrutiny that I can't explain. So if your comment disappears, I'm not doing it. Let's talk about this. In the continuing saga of what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania, July 13th, where we all know that President Trump was shot at and struck by gunfire from a lone shooter. Now, I've been kind of covering different aspects of this, and this is kind of not so much a capping of this whole thing. This is just another part of this whole story. Now, if you remember, Kimberly Cheatle went before I believe it was the House Judiciary to talk about what happened that day, and her testimony was a disaster. Period. She didn't answer any questions, really, unless they were favorable. And she was getting pressure from both Democrats and Republicans. They were both coming down on her heavily. And they all pushed for her to resign. Now, you've got your outliers in this whole thing. We got Jasmine Crockett, if you don't remember who she is. She's the ghetto congresswoman who decided to play the dirty dozen with Marjorie Taylor Greene on the House floor. And Ayanna Pressley, who both try to turn it into a racism, sexism, misogyny ideal.
Director Cheatle, was the incident on July 13th due to DEI, or rather systemic failures in communication and potentially safety protocols?
The incident on the 13th has nothing to do with DEI. The incident on the 13th has to do with a failure or a gap either in planning or communication.
One of my questions has to do with if you have any bias training that your officers undergo. And the reason that I ask that, because as a civil rights lawyer, I have learned so many times in having to deal with law enforcement that there usually is not a perception of a threat when it is a young white male, even if they are carrying a long gun. Yet a lot of times, at least in this country, when it comes to law enforcement, there is a perceived threat just by somebody having a little bit more melanin in their skin. In the space in which this event took place, it was an open carry space. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So I hail from the state of Texas, and interestingly enough, I was serving in the state house right after there was a mass shooting in El Paso. We had an opportunity to do right by our citizens in Texas, but we did not. Instead, they passed permitless carry. And what my colleagues kept trying to get you to answer, because we want to come up with solutions, we don't want to keep pointing the finger. And right now, you've got a bunch of fingers that are pointed at you. But our job is to solve problems for the American people. And to be perfectly honest, the numbers are clear. I think almost every major law enforcement agency come forward and say that they were against permitless carry because they said that their jobs would be made more difficult. Unfortunately, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle in the state of Texas decided that they would ignore those warnings, and they passed the law instead. And right after they passed that law, we ended up with Uvalde. And we heard the stories of those officers that were scared to go in and save those babies because of the firearm in that case, 18-year-old had in his hands.
Now, Director Cheatle, you have noted that numerous investigations are ongoing related to the Secret Service response, and that we can expect a report in the next 60 days. With the election nearly 100 days away, that is an unacceptable timeline, and it makes people less safe. It also allows my colleagues across the aisle, Republicans, additional time to spread dangerous misinformation, which also puts people in harm's way. Some Republicans have exploited this moment to continue to attack progress towards racial justice and gender equity in America. Disappointing, but not surprising. I hesitate to repeat their racist and sexist tropes, but in summary, Republicans have wrongfully and shamefully stated that hiring women and people of color hindered the response to the shooting. Now, this is part and parcel of Republican strategy to constantly attack necessary diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, to undermine the contributions that women, people of color, the disability community, and others make to this country each and every day. And it is disgraceful.
Sorry, this has nothing to do with race or gender or nothing. She failed at her job. She failed at her job. And yes, she says the buck stops here, then she needs to take that accountability and step down, which she did. Because she stepped down probably because the pressure that would be brought to bear on Biden for not firing her, and Mayorkas not getting involved and getting rid of her, is probably why. There was some phone calls made and said, yeah, just do this gracefully. You can say you resigned. That way you're not going to be saying we fired you, and I won't get grief from Republicans for not firing you. But I want to come back to Crockett and Presley, these two Congress people. What is your, they're talking about DEI. You don't apply DEI when it comes to protecting another person's life. You get the best person for the job. Now, let me point out this. Let me show you this clip. This is Cheatle coming into that hearing. Look at her security.
You failed, Cheatle, in assassinating Trump. You failed. Satan isn't all powerful. You're on the wrong side. You reap what you sow, Cheatle. God is good. God is in control, Cheatle.
Where are the women at? Where's the DEI at? Notice, none there. They're all tall, strapping men. And I bet you 10-1, Crockett and Presley, I guarantee there's not a woman anywhere in their security forces. I guarantee it. You don't play DEI when you're trying to protect someone's life. That's not the place for it. But as I said, she has now officially stepped down, which she should. But I want to play one clip because this, of course, is just annoying to hear this. But let me play it for you.
Help us understand, however, I will stipulate that there's an ongoing investigation. You don't want to go into too much detail on that until you've been able to ascertain all the facts and analyze what they mean. You can understand, however, the anxiety we and the American public have about how could this happen and how can we ensure it can't recur. Now, there are some things my friends on one particular side of the aisle don't really want to talk about, like AR-15s and access to them by a 20-year-old, or anybody for that matter. Presumably, Director Cheatle, the ubiquity of weapons, guns in America, especially assault weapons or semi-automatic weapons, that's helped your job and the mission of your agencies, right? It's made it less complicated, isn't that true?
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding your question.
Real simple. More guns, especially dangerous ones, have made your job protecting people easier. Is that not right?
I think from every
Director Cheatle, this is simple English. More guns, do they make your job more complicated or less complicated in protecting these 36 clients and visiting heads of state and heads of government that come to Washington?
I think the Secret Service needs to take into account.
I didn't ask that.
That they're in.
I'm sorry. I asked a simple question, which deserves a simple answer. The ubiquity of guns, dangerous weapons in America, like AR-15s, has that made your job, that is to say the mission of the Secret Service, easier or more difficult?
That was Representative Connolly, and you can clearly see what he's insinuating. The fact that Americans own guns makes her job harder. No, it's the fact she didn't do her job, which made her job harder and put her on the hot seat and pretty much the sacrificial lamb for this complete failure of security for a former president at a rally. But, you know, I expected that. And, you know, Joe Biden was quick to run to the podium to talk about banning assault weapons and weapons of war right after this.
You want to stand against violence in America and join me in getting these weapons of war off the streets of America. An AR-15 was used in the shooting of Donald Trump. Just as it was an assault weapon that killed so many others, including children. It's time to outlaw them. I did it once and I will do it again.
So why are we not? I knew this angle was coming, so I'm not even vaguely surprised by anything that's coming out of the Democrats' mouths at this point in time. But Kimberly Cheatle, in my opinion, is the sacrificial lamb for this whole thing. And that's the only way I can leave it. But let me know what you think. As always, you can leave your comments in the comment section below. And as always, any statements of violence or statements that lead to violence will be removed. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you're notified the next time a video goes live. I'm going to see you on the next one. Peace.